I am the chair of the program committee of City Club Missoula. Thank you for being here. City Club provides a venue for public education and forums. We talk about important civic issues, nonpartisan, and we learn about Missoula, we learn about our community, we learn about making a difference. So if you enjoy those things, please sustain City Club by becoming a member, attending our forums, and we do have a website, cityclubmissoula.org, to find out more. Our program next month in November 17th, it's always the third Friday of the month, will be focused on international business based in Missoula. Arnie Sherman of the Montana World Trade Center, Larry Kolb of TSI, and John Ryan of Armor Auto will be here November 17th. Please join us for that. You can make reservations via the website or phone, cityclubmissoula.org. Today we will be hosting speakers on open space. So thank you all for being here, and I'll introduce Ginny Merriam. She'll be the moderator today. We will hear from the panelists, have some discussion, and finish with Q&A. So thank you. Ginny Merriam. I can take this with me.
Hello, thank you for coming to City Club. We'll be talking about the open space bond that will be appearing on your ballot. Of course, for many of you, you have already voted, but I hope not too many. Just in a couple of weeks. We have 5 distinguished panelists today, and maybe I can just have you all come up and take a seat. It's not too high a step. We'll be passing the microphone today. I have with me Jacque Corday, who is the manager of the city's open space program, Mr. Jerry Ballas, who is on the Missoula City Council. He represents Ward 4, and he's also chairman of the Conservation Committee. Wendy Ninteman, who is the executive director of Five Valleys Land Trust. Larry Swanson, who is an economist with the Center for the Rocky Mountain West and director of the center. And Jean Curtis, who is the Missoula County Commissioner. We're giving these panelists each 5 minutes to make a presentation. I have brought my personal tomato from home to time them and make certain that this is nonpartisan, no favoritism, equal time. And I think the order we had decided we'll be leading off with Wendy.
I'm gonna go down here. Good morning. Almost afternoon. Thanks for coming to City Club. Earlier this week, I was in my office when a reporter called to ask me a question about the open space bond. And when I got the call, I couldn't help but think about my grandfather. And my grandpa's name was King Vanderwicken. And although he really was not a king, he was a pretty amazing and wonderful grandfather. And this question from the reporter made me think of a question that my own grandfather asked me over 10 years ago. It was his 89th birthday, and for his birthday, we had decided to take him to the San Diego Zoo to see some pretty wonderful animals. And there we were in front of the giant panda exhibit when my grandfather, kind of the ultimate pragmatist, looked across the glass at the animals and then looked at me and said, "Well, this is nice, but what good is it?" We were looking at one of the most rarest, most endangered species on Earth, and my jaw just dropped. You know, I thought, well, isn't that just so obvious? But the fact is that the answer is no. It isn't always obvious what makes something precious. Full appreciation calls for a full understanding of what that thing brings to our lives and whether or not we could do without it. So as you may have guessed by now, the question the reporter had for me was, what good is open space? Well, open space is very, very far from empty space. It provides so many things, including healthy watersheds, rivers, streams, and lakes that protect clean water for our communities, healthy wildlife and waterfowl populations, access to trails and recreational opportunities that are essential to the quality of life that we enjoy here in western Montana. Family farms, ranches, and timberlands that supply food for our farmers markets, which are growing in popularity and bring the food to our tables, lumber for our homes and plants for our gardens, and many other things that we all want and that we all use. Open space provides the scenic views that define the landscape of this place. And finally, open space provides us with a sense of connectedness to not just to the land, but also to each other. We are all lucky that we live in a community that values all of these things that open space provides. And I especially am lucky because I get to work for an organization that has as our mission protecting those things. And every morning as I walk to work and I cross the Higgins Street Bridge, I can see osprey, and I can see herons, and I can see eagles. And then I can look down and I can see runners and walkers and bikers on the river trail. I look to the north and I see the steeple of the St. Francis Church framed against the peaceful North Hills. I look to the east and I see our twin guardians, Mount Sentinel and Mount Jumbo, alongside the Hellgate Canyon, standing open and standing majestic, watching over our city and the valley that spills away from them to the west. But much of this view that I cherish, and probably you cherish too, is not protected. We are losing our open lands every single day as Missoula County's population grows. And this open space bond is not about stopping growth. I want to really stress that. It's more about guiding growth and protecting some of those places that are just simply too valuable to develop. For less than $2 a month, we can help do that. We can help support this collective city-county effort that will build upon the city's tremendous history of success with open space and expand that effort into the county. Time is of the essence to conserve precious open spaces before it's too late. As the late great historian K. Ross Toole, who was still teaching when I went to school here, said, "So what we have left of what we once had has suddenly become precious, just as any scarce commodity becomes precious, and it will become more and more so until it becomes infinitely precious because we cannot live without it." What do each of you want Missoula County to look like for your kids and for your grandkids in 20 years or 50 years or 100 years? Does your picture include clean water and agricultural land, wildlife and recreational opportunities? And if it does, we need to act now, because the future of many of your own particular favorite special places is precarious. She cut me off at the punchline, which was, I'm pretty sure that even my grandfather would agree that open space is good for an awful lot. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm the Open Space Program Manager for the city, and it's my job to implement our open space plan. And so I wanted to give you a little bit of history about that and tell you about that. In the early 1990s, Missoula, as you know, started to really start growing really fast again. It slowed down in the 80s, but then in the 90s it started picking up. And people were really worried that we didn't have any plan in place to, no vision for protecting open space. And so citizens came together, along with the planning department, to start drafting an open space plan, the first plan. And in 1994, they got on that into that in earnest. The Open Space Advisory Committee, which is a group of 12 citizens, volunteer citizens, and the planning department drafted that plan. And it was adopted in 1995 by both the city council and the county commissioners. And the plan boundaries, I hope most of you can see it, takes in the greater hub of the five valleys, goes up past the Y out into the Grass Valley area, out through Mullen and almost down to Lolo and out to Bonner. So it takes in the big hub of the greater Missoula area. And what the plan did was it established priorities. Through a lot of public workshops, a lot of comments from the public, we asked them, what is important to you to build on an open space system in Missoula? What would you like to see preserved? And what the people came back and said is, we love our view sheds, we love our rivers, we love trails. We want to see those protected as much as possible. So what these yellow dotted lines mean are the priority areas that were established in that 1995 plan. You'll see, of course, Mount Jumbo, Mount Sentinel, the North Hills, the South Hills, the river corridors, and some of the most productive farmland out in the Grass Valley area were all established as priorities. And then the citizens in November of 1995 had the opportunity to vote on a bond, a $5 million open space bond, and they passed that with an overwhelming majority. And in the past 10 years, what we've been doing with that $5 million is going about in a big successful way and protecting a lot of those cornerstones that were the priorities. So first was a purchase of almost 1,500 acres on Mount Jumbo. Next, almost 1,000 acres on Mount Sentinel. Over 600 acres in the North Hills. Almost 200 acres have now been protected along the Clark Fork corridor. 97 acres out at the fort. All of those were mentioned as priorities, and so all of those have now been preserved. That was through partnerships that we formed with the Forest Service and Fish, Wildlife and Parks and Five Valleys Land Trust and Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. Partners such as those helped us stretch that $5 million to over $8.5 million in value of land. So it's been a very successful program. So what we're talking about now is, do the people of Missoula want to see that program continue? And in 2005, the Open Space Advisory Committee started talking about the fact that, well, the money's almost all gone from the 95 bond. What do we need to do to carry on this vision? First thing that seemed most important was updating that 95 plan since 10 years had passed. So we basically went through a year-long process of involving the public again in updating that plan. It's now been updated, and in September of this year, it was adopted again by the City Council and the County Commissioners. And what we found out when we went back out to the public again was that they are very supportive of this program. They want to see it continue, and they still see the priorities are the same. They still want to see continuation of protection in the North Hills, in the South Hills, along the river corridors, and they'd love to see an expansion of the trails. Hundreds and hundreds of people every day benefit so much from the trails that we've been able to put in to connect all of these open spaces. So that's basically what this bond is about. And now what's really incredible is the vision has been expanded to include the entire county. Because as you know, if you've been reading the papers about the different polls that have been taken over the past year, people all over the county are very concerned about the loss of open space, and growth is happening all over the county. So now, this time, everybody in all of the communities have an opportunity to say yes to open space.
Don't start.
Wendy, what are your first words?
Good afternoon. I'm Jerry Ballas. I'm one of the elected city council people here that would like to present you with some points to ponder. All good things, most good things, come with a price to pay. And there are at least 6 elected city council people that think there's a price to pay that you need to be aware of and consider as you make any kind of vote on any kind of bond issue. Our first point that we want to ponder is the effect on taxpayers and on renters and on affordability and a lot of issues we've been discussing. And that has to do with, we feel when you vote for a bond issue, like when you go out and try to get a loan on something, the bank asks you for your financial status and how many loans you have out and how much money you make and things like that. So we want to make sure that the citizens of Missoula are fully aware of what they're currently paying for and how long they're going to pay for it. So I'll start off with my basic list. 96, 97, we did pass an open space bond. We still have $3,300,000 to pay. We still have 10 years to pay that. In 1998, we passed a fire bond. There's still $1,200,000 almost left to pay. There's 12 years to pay on that. We also constructed a maintenance facility and paying for that with a bond, $1.3 million over the next 14 years. 2003, we all voted for an aquatics bond. That sold for $7,500,000. We've got 19 years to pay for that. 2005, we voted for a fire station bond because we needed a new fire station. That's $5,740,000 for the next 20 years. Throughout that, about every month, the councilors have to vote on impacts to our city citizens in various neighborhoods. SID bonds for sewers, bonds for sidewalks and curbs. Some of those hit property owners for $10,000 or more or less. We vote for sewer extensions, very controversial up the rattlesnake. And in the near future, what you haven't really heard a lot of is you're going to be asked to consider a bond for a facility service, public facility service for the city, for the police department. That will range anywhere from $10 to $15 million. So I lay two plans out here, and this is some of our dilemma. One's the Missoula Open Space Plan. One's a facility needs assessment that the county took when we were considering both a sheriff and a police department. My dilemma is, I think there's a priority here, and there's 6 other people on the council that think there's a priority here. Because we're wondering just how much will the taxpayers and the renters of Missoula be able to keep bear and approve bonds. Right now, I look back over the last 10 years and I checked out my tax statements. My tax statement went up 40% in the last 10 years. My income went up 20%. There's a difference there. And I don't think that I'm the only one in the community that has that problem. And we also know there's an awful lot of people that live on fixed income, Social Security and whatnot, that are trying to stay in their homes. And I don't think Social Security has gone up to pay for all of those increases. The second issue we're concerned about, and what you don't always hear about, is the after effects of voting for bonds, especially something like the open space bond, the last one, that included absolutely no money whatsoever for maintenance. So we've been struggling ever since that bond was passed on how to maintain and manage our open space. Once you buy it, you have an obligation to maintain it. And that's what 99% of our money went for, was to purchase open space for public access. On the map on the wall over here, it's a little bit hard to read, but I have posted a map of most of Mount Sentinel, Mount Jumbo, and the North Hills, and there will be highlights on there of part of the areas that we have to manage and try to maintain, and weeds that we're trying to control. And it is difficult, and you're going to pay the price. Thank you.
I very seldom use notes, as my colleagues at the center know. I usually come in with 100 slides, and we plow through those in about an hour. One of the reasons I don't use notes is because I can't read, I can't see. I have to look over the top of my glasses. But I brought some notes here that I hope I can read, just to try to put some of this into context. Since 1990, Missoula County has grown from 79,000 people to over 100,000 people. And over the course of the next 10 years, it'll grow by another 10,000 people. So that's 28% growth since 1990. The number of housing units has expanded from over 33,000 to around 45,000. That's about a 35% increase. And over the course of the next 10 years, that'll grow by another 45 to 5,000 housing units. Personal income growth has went from about $1.25 billion to almost $3 billion, not adjusted for inflation. That's a 140% increase over this same period. And adjusted for inflation, that's about 75%. So when you look at $10 million to set aside to protect some of the important spaces as we continue to accommodate this growth that also is accommodating the growth in our economy, it amounts to about 1/3 of 1% of 1 year's income. And over 5 years, it's about 7/10 of 1% of personal income. And this is over a 20-year period. Open space bonding is the instrument through which we say as a community, we want to spend a little money to acquire open space assets as we grow. And my only fear in all of this is we're being a penny wise and a pound foolish. Essentially, you only get one shot with these things. You can't turn the clock back. And the more aggressive you are with some of these open space bonds and programs, and the better you do it, it's essentially about all you can do as a growing community to try to improve or maintain the quality of life here as you continue to grow. Quality of life has become the dominant thing pushing us along economically. And so this kind of bond and the money, this very small amount of money that's set aside for this purpose, is one of the single most investments that we can make in this community's economic future. That's it.
Good afternoon. The community of Missoula has done a great job of protecting open space in many forms with the 1995 bond, but there's much more to do. Missoula County is really a collection of individual communities spread throughout, from Huson to Evero, from Condon to Greeno, from Rock Creek to Lolo. These small communities throughout this county do not have the luxury of having 60,000 people to fund a bond or to carry the staff to carry it out. Missoula is the only incorporated city or town in Missoula County. Yet almost every community in Missoula County has a group of citizens who have worked to identify open space that they believe would be good to protect. Wildlife corridors, working farms and ranches, timberland, waterways. About 18 months ago, the commission appointed what we called our Open Lands Working Group with 2 landowners from each of the 9 planning regions in the county to discuss tools to help preserve family farms and ranches and open lands and protect water quality. Last December, that working group unanimously recommended that the county commissioners consider putting an open space bond on the ballot. That's why this unique city-county partnership to protect open space with a county-wide open space bond is so important. It will be a partnership between all of us, the small communities, the medium ones, the large ones, working together to protect open lands that make us such a great place to live. I was recently reminded that the root word of community is common. This open space will serve the common good of the citizens throughout the county and those that come to visit. It will be used for a landowner-driven voluntary land conservation program. We all see the growth that's happening here in the valley. You don't have to drive very far to go, oh my gosh, when did they build that? But the pressure of growth on our rural areas of the county is really incredible. The development there is almost always larger tracts of land that serve as wildlife corridors, wildlife habitat, the places where our rivers and streams start, the riparian areas, the farmland, the ranch land, the timberland, and they all have roads that weren't built to handle much more traffic. In fact, we get told they don't handle the traffic that's there, and they're always dusty. On your tables are some handouts that show some of this growth that's happening in the county that I'm going to refer to. The percentage of change in the number of occupied housing units between the year 2000 and 2004 in some of our rural areas really tells the story. In the Swan Valley, there are 20.5% more homes than there were in that 4-year period. There was that much growth. 20.7% in the Potomac-Greeno area, 19.1 in Evero, 14.2 in 9 Mile, 10.9 in Frenchtown, and you can see the rest of the numbers. The rural areas of the county are where we go to get away, to access public lands, to recreate, to hike, to hunt, to fish, to swim, to just view wildlife, or take a drive because the leaves are turning in the fall. And remember, that is where all of our watersheds begin. We have the Clearwater, which runs into the Blackfoot, which runs into the Clark Fork, and meets up with the Bitterroot. And in the Swan Valley, the Swan River actually flows the other direction and ends up in Flathead Lake, which then the Flathead River flows out and meets up again with the Clark Fork. So it's important to protect these rural areas. In the Commission's office, we see these subdivisions come before us all the time. And we have to worry, is there lynx? The lynx are an endangered species now, and there are more lynx in the Sealy-Swan Valley than anywhere else in the North American continent. The grizzly bears, of course, we need to protect. The other challenge in Missoula County is the fact that Plum Creek, now a real estate investment trust and no longer a timber company, is divesting itself of much of its land. They've even figured out how to shelter the land sales, but we'll talk about that another day. And I'm the end, right? So I just wanted to give you a couple other numbers. She's behind me, but she's not my boss. 26% of all the land in Missoula County is owned by Plum Creek Timber. 58% of the private land, but even counting Forest Service and DNRC, they own 26%. So we have to worry about that, and the other map will show you that. So on behalf of the county commissioners and the mayor, I would urge you to vote yes on the $10 million countywide bond. It's an opportunity for us collectively as a county to invest in the future of our land and make a difference for the people, the wildlife, the water quality, and the economy. Thanks.
Is that what you're supposed to say? So what we do at City Club, for those of you who have not been here before, is now is your digestion period, 10 minutes, where you may discuss among yourselves at the tables, and I believe there are materials on the tables to help with your discussion. Following that 10 minutes, each table will report the gist of its discussion, and Alex Taft will walk around with a microphone to help you do that. The panelists can also take questions as time allows, and I think we'll have some time for that. You've been talking for 10 minutes, actually about 12. I misspoke earlier. Mr. Jeff Badnock will be the one coming around with the microphone. And I think what we'll do is first have the reports from the tables and then open it up to general questions. Which table would like to go first? You have a volunteer?
I think that table at the end volunteers.
Jeff will find you.
I think you volunteered. Who's going to be reporting?
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Hi. Is it? Okay. Well, we talked about many things in a very short time, and one of them was that question that Mr. Ballas presented about the cost, and in our discussion we had many reasons why the benefit of doing this outweighed the costs that he was talking about. Part of it was Larry Swanson's figures about how much it's going to cost people, and then about the value in the long run of economically to Missoula County when tourists come or other people want to come live here. And so we talked about that. We talked about the health benefits, and maybe Donna could talk about that too at the end of this, because she had some statistics, recent statistics about the value of parks and recreation and the problem with obesity in this country and how Montana is faring. She could tell you something about that. But all in all, now what else did I forget? Because I didn't know I was going to be doing this. I think they picked me because I'm not in any committee, so I look a little more legitimate. But anyhow, Donna maybe can talk here about some facts.
I just returned from the National Recreation and Park Association Congress, and there's things you have a sense of or feel when you work in Parks and Recreation, but what we know is that 1 in 5 children are obese, not fat, and 1 in 3 adults are obese in our country. Montana fares better than most. We're still heavier than we've ever been. The research I shared is there is a direct correlation in the city of Los Angeles because they have some very park and open space deprived areas, and their obesity is ranging from 23 to 40%. It's directly related to their proximity to a park or open space.
I'm glad it's related to that and not global warming. Who's going to speak from this table? Katie?
I'm speaking. We actually had a really similar discussion about the costs and then the benefits and the economic benefits, but we had a question. Why only $10 million? We were thinking that the bond should be for significantly more, that overall the cost is very small, it gets distributed over a long period of time, new people come in. All the folks on the table that represented real estate and mortgage businesses pointed out that their clients are moving to Missoula, bringing in economic development opportunities just for the quality of life issues, and that this would be a great way to continue to preserve that over time.
I'm probably the one that gets that. So the group that brought us the idea did request that we put a $20 million bond on the ballot. But after a lot of consultation, and we did actually do a survey of the citizens in the county that the university did for us to see how it would poll out, and 20 million did poll okay. But our bond council tells us that we have to be able to commit that the money from the bond would be, within 3 or 4 years, you have to be able to say you're going to be able to spend that $10 million. And because this program, we don't have any big projects like mountains to buy that we know are for sale. It's more of a voluntary conservation easement. We don't know which projects are going to come forward, so we decided to be more conservative so that we weren't breaking bond laws. Also, in Gallatin County, they passed a $10 million bond and came back in just a few years before they even spent it all and did another one. So our rationale was that we would do the 10. When people saw the success of it, we'd be able to pass another 10 if it was needed.
I think the conversation at the table, I was absent for part of it, but I think it's centered around a question. There is both a positive and negative in every major public effort like this. There's both a positive and a negative. And I think our table would ask a question that might be perceived to find out more information on the reverse side of open space, that is the negative end of it. I do want to say in context that Carol and I benefit greatly from open space because we're virtually surrounded by it, and 2 of the sides that surround us were in the parcel that we purchased. and were given to open space, and Carol and I gladly pay the taxes on that land. So we're for open space, but here's the question. I think it may be that Missoula is forcing young married couples into into double-wide trailers, don't you? Because of land values? Nobody's doing it advertently, but it does seem to me that prudence absolutely requires the open space proponents to know whether or not increasing the amount of open space land in this state and taking it out of possible residential use is going to continue, if in fact it's happening, to push young married couples who have moderate incomes in this state further and further away from this city that they love. And I think prudence requires the open space people to know what's the inflation in the land that's left, and can that be the fault of having purchased too much space to keep it open? It's just prudent.
Is that a question, Pat? Or a statement?
Only if there's an answer.
Do we want, well.
About the maintenance, was there money put aside for maintenance of this open space? Or was there not? Was there maintenance money put aside, or is it a part of this bond issue to maintain that land?
That's a question I think Jacque Corday can answer pretty briefly.
Not in the 1995 bond, but in the ballot language for this 2006 bond, it specifically says that lands that we acquire can be cleaned up and the weeds treated in order to make it ready for the public. So the bond language specifically deals with that issue.
I think we had a pretty good, oh, go ahead.
Just one more, a bond cannot be used for maintenance, but this time at least we put in so we can prepare the land and get rid of the weeds to start with and then maintain it. You have to use a levy for maintenance or some other funding.
Yeah, on the property values, if you have a community that plans well, that'll push up property values. If you got a community that puts in nice streets, that'll push up property values. If you got a community that builds nice homes and nice commercial developments and structures, that'll push up property values. And if you got a community that sets aside open space and parks as they grow and develop, that'll push up property values. All of these things not only push up, but protect property values. If you want to push property values down, do it all wrong. That's almost what it comes down to.
Do I get to report? Thank you.
Please report, Ken. I'm sorry.
So many microphones floating around. We had a pretty good discussion about and a consensus to support the bond. We think it's a valuable investment in our futures, and with all the growth that's happening, it's time now to go ahead and move ahead with that. There's a couple items that did come up in the discussion. One was the one that just discussed about maintenance, and I think there has to be a clear understanding of the process for acquisition as well. I think the public needs to know how the priorities are to be set and how that process is to go forth, because I know in my own situation, if you don't have good public intercourse as these things proceed, there's a lot of hate and discontent down the road later. So I think that's important. The other thing that came up, and I will be personally responsible for pushing this agenda, is the whole idea of growth in general. Open space is a good way of controlling growth, but we also need some planning to go with that, hand in hand. And I wish I could say I came up with this idea, but my good friend and colleague, Steve Loken, suggested this at the real estate conference a couple of weeks ago. And that's the idea of having a small percentage of the property of the real estate transfer tax go into a planning fund, so that there's some predictability to all those people that are coming into our area for development to know what they're going to be looking for. We need to take a real strong look at that so we don't end up with these 20-acre parcels with ranchettes spread all over the Northwest. So that's something to think about.
Three main points or issues. The first one is sort of a question of semantics. We spun our wheels quite a bit on the term land use planning. And I'll just throw out all the things that came under the discussion. And the answer is the question is, what is land use planning? And the answer is probably all of the above. It's a wish list. It's not binding. It's an overarching plan. It's something to be ignored. It's impotent on important issues. It's something that the state, the eastern part and the western part of the state does not agree on. It's individual property rights versus the common good, and it can involve citizen zoning. So you see, we did talk a lot about that term land use planning. The second point our group talked about was the idea that you can't go backwards. If you lose the space, you will never get it back. And the third is the idea of reusing land, that we should, when we're trying to think of how can we put more people into Missoula, look at the land that has been used before and maybe is blighted now or in some way not usable, and giving developers the option with a carrot to develop this type of land first before we spread out into others. Okay.
Thank you.
Our table took on the issue of access. We had a bit of a lively debate about the use of the conservation easement as the tool for protecting open lands, which this bond measure would largely do, although not completely, and the trade-off on the one hand of some people's reluctance in the public to use public money for conservation easements that they're not going to be able to walk on and take their dogs on and run on and so forth. But on the other hand, the ability to solve somewhat the problem of maintenance that's been brought up here today by that land staying in public hands or staying in private hands and still being on the tax roll, and the individual landowners being responsible for maintenance and so forth. So we bandied around a lot of different topics around the whole issue of access and conservation easements for this bond, and didn't really come to a table-wide consensus about that issue.
Thank you.
That last
One
table,
more?
They have most of the speakers. I want to give it to somebody who...
This was basically
you joined? Okay. All right.
And the rest are speakers.
What do you think, Jeff? About what?
Questions. What do you think, Jeff? That's the question.
About what? I think open space is tremendously important. I think we're blessed to have it here in Missoula. I think we have to do better about my table's conversation about reusing urban lands that have already been used once. We need to reuse them again. Hopefully it's a backdoor way to take some of the pressure off the consumption of open space. But that said, I don't think that alone will do it. We have to do some protection of open space, and I think this is one way to do it.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes, Sarah.
Follow up on the easement idea. The way the ballot language is set, does that allow you to spend any of this money for conservation easements, particularly if you gear it to public access too?
Who?
The ballot language allows us to purchase or help purchase conservation easements. So I don't know if I understood your question really well. So I think the idea is that the majority of what will be spent, maybe I'll back up. In the half of the bond will be spent in the Missoula Valley, the center of the map. The other half will be spent out in the other 8 planning regions. In the outlying regions, we expect that more of the money would be spent on conservation easements on working farms and ranches to protect habitat and different things. There could be some purchases out there, though, that might be a purchase of a small piece so that you could get public access to a lake or some other public lands. That's kind of how we picture it. Because it's voluntary, we never know what's going to come forward.
Ginny, I've got, excuse me, I've got 3 real quick questions.
Okay.
Can I see a show of hands of all the people in here who are Missoula County voters who are going to vote in November? Raise your hands if you're going to vote. I love it. I love it. Okay. How many of you have made up your mind about how you're going to vote on this issue? Don't tell me what it is, but that you've made up your mind. Okay. And this is the last one. This is for City Club. How many of you have had your mind either made up or changed as a result of today's topical presentation? Okay, so from now on, we're going to have mud wrestling at City Club instead of this.
That's very interesting. Comment from Jerry?
Yeah, could I leave you with one last thought? And it has to do with last week, the people in Rattlesnake came to the city council. They want to pass an SID to do some improvements to Pineview Park and to annex it into the city. The ongoing cost in that would probably be about, I think it's a little less than $20,000 or $20 a year for the taxpayer. I called up a friend of mine that lives in that area, and I asked her if she knew about the project and she was in favor of it, and she said yes. And I asked her, don't you worry about your taxes? And her answer was, lawyers and doctors live up the Rattlesnake. They can afford to pay more. What are you going to do about the rest of the people in Missoula?
More questions.
My name is Jimmy Elliott. I represent Frenchtown, Hughson, and Evero in the state legislature. And the folks out there have a little more conservative take on things like this. Larry pointed out that open space will increase property values, and it will. That's increasing wealth. Will it increase income? And an argument might be made that it might increase income some. But I think that you have, as Pat Williams says, I think that you have a very important problem to solve in Missoula and in the city of Missoula as well, and that is affordable housing for working people. We've seen it throughout the state, started in Big Sky, where people live 80 miles away and drive to work at Big Sky. You have that in Missoula now, and I think that that is an equally important issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Any more?
Since that issue has come up twice, I just want to try to really quickly address it as far as the affordable housing issue. I just want you to know that where we have bought our 3,300 acres of land so far since 1995, steep hillsides, floodplain, they're not areas where affordable housing would ever go. So I just want you to know that what we're buying and what we're after is generally, we're not in competition with affordable housing. It's not where it would go. So, and
that's really important. I don't know what land you hope to purchase. Is none of that land developable? Is that the point?
okay. Generally, I'm not saying that none of it's not developable. I'm saying that it's land that affordable housing would never go in. If Sentinel, for example, if we weren't able to buy that, what would have gone up there? Mansions. We wouldn't have had affordable housing up on Sentinel. What would have gone in the floodplain? Well, if they could have gotten a floodplain permit to build in it, it wouldn't have been affordable housing that would have gone in the floodplain. So I'm saying that generally we're not out there to compete with where affordable housing is going to go.
Mr. Bangs had a comment on this?
Yeah, I'd like to address that. I'm Colin Bangs. I'm a realtor, developer, and my major concern is for a long, long time has been affordable housing. We build entry-level housing, we build apartments sometimes, and it's been a big concern. I've worked with Habitat for Humanity, Human Resource Council, Homeward, et cetera, in trying to win the battle of affordable housing. We're not winning, but we're not losing as badly as we would if we hadn't been fighting the battle. I've looked at this carefully. I have been concerned about it. I am on the committee that's supporting and bringing you the advertising. The reason I made that decision is two. As Jacque just mentioned, the land that they purchased before was maybe okay for McMansions, but it wasn't okay for housing for regular Missoula workers. There was no potential housing sites for normal working families in Missoula that were lost. We hope to see that continue. The second reason is that I strongly believe that the answer to affordable housing in Missoula is going to be higher densities. It's going to be smaller yards, it's going to be condominiums, it's going to be townhouses. People are losing their backyards in order to be able to find a house they can afford to buy. When they lose their backyards, there's more need for open space close to where they live. So what I see Missoula, what I hope to see Missoula growing at, is more urban type of densities with more open space close at hand for the people that live there. So that's why I'm supporting it.
Thank you, Colin. We have time for maybe one more question, comment.
This is my first City Club Missoula, so I want to thank you all for your great conversation today. And I am actually working on the campaign to turn out the vote. And seeing that you all are so supportive, I'm looking for volunteers to come help make phone calls in the next couple of weeks to turn out the vote and get people to come vote. So if you're interested, please come talk to me and we can get you started helping out. Thanks.
Thank you for coming to City Club. Please come again next month and bring a friend.